Welcome, guys! Welcome back to Minko's Corner. I hope you had a great day. I hope you enjoyed my reaction on Charlemagne. Part 2 is coming tomorrow. Today I'm going to do another history march. I was very impressed by the channel, by the content of the videos and the way they were made. They were very informative. I loved them very much. Today we're going to learn about the Renaissance, rise of the city-states in Italy. Now, I know that Italy as a country was created way later in life. It was created, I think, in 1861 or something. Very, very, very late. And beforehand, Italy was an amalgamation of different city-states from Sardinia, Piedmont to or the two Sicilies, but beforehand Naples and Sicily, and it was a whole mess. It was when the Papal States and Ferrara and the Florence and Venice. It was a it was a very weird part of the European continent. It wasn't united at all until 1861. Um, Now, I'm very interested in the rise of the city-states, how they came to be, and all that. So I love the Renaissance, a very interesting period in history, and I hope you enjoyed my reaction to this video. Like, subscribe, and all that, and let's go in.
In the early 14th century, a new way of thinking stirred in the streets of prosperous Florence. Gradually, it spread across Europe, stirring up ideas and cultivating change. The birth of the Renaissance was the most profound cultural revolution. It launched Europe out of the Middle Ages and into the modern age. Its dominance spanned 3 centuries and was responsible for profound changes around the arts, commerce, and intellectual pursuits, including a new structure for trade, business ownership by investors, a system of business activity across international borders, state borrowing, and a more sophisticated system of asset accounting. The Renaissance grew out of new philosophical rationale. The notion that man is the measure of all things was a new form of humanism rekindled from ancient Greek thinking and based on the views of Protagoras. It gave human responsibility and ownership for the creation and development of their world. Its influence was limitless, from science, arts, politics, literature, and social endeavors. It spread throughout Europe, but its impact varied considerably. This is the story of the Renaissance.
Michelangelo, of course.
If you
If
like
I'm
the
wrong-
maps we create on our channel, make sure to check out Daniel Hasenbo's class called Fantasy Cities in Photoshop. Culturally, the Renaissance nurtured the growth and accomplishments in literature, art, and education. The father of Renaissance literature was Petrarch, the Italian poet who first penned the sonnet and sparked the resurgence of the vernacular and Latin literature.
That's interesting.
Art, natural beauty, depth in visual presentations, and intellectual creativity from artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo represent the term Renaissance man. At the same time, the reform of education created new schools for learning and promoted classical history and literature studies. The influence was far-reaching, encompassing intellectual growth and social and political reform. As a movement, it changed the nature of science, encouraging reliability through observation. In politics, it inspired internationalism and diplomacy.
Is that
Furthermore,
Machiavelli?
social upheaval stemmed from a new, modern way of thinking. Generally, historians believe that the Renaissance started in Florence, Italy,
yeah.
but beyond this, why the Renaissance happened and when it started is still open to debate. Popular theories for what conditions prompted such profound change cover a spectrum of ideas. Some point to Florence's social and political structures as the driving force.
The Medici are a very interesting family based in Florence, and the whole history of Medici rule is it was already made in a series that I watched. I don't know where I watched it, but it was a very good series on the Medicis. and their rise, and you go through the different characters, and how much drama the Medicis went through, especially before they became a duchy, the Duchy of Florence, when they were just a republic. And their internal drama between the Pazzi and the Medici, and when the Pazzi were all hanged because they betrayed the Medici, or at least they didn't even betray them, but they turned against them. And it was a very interesting. No, they killed a son of the Medici, and they were eventually all hanged.
Others allude to the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks, which prompted the migration of Greek scholars into Florence. Finally, the impact of the patronage by the Medici family, the most powerful family
Lorenzo.
in Europe at the time, and their commitment to reform, was another big factor. Dating the beginning of the Renaissance is also a puzzle. There is a remarkably romantic attachment to the notion that the official start date should be 1401. This year, Lorenzo Ghiberti and Filippo Brunelleschi battled for the right to build the new bronze doors of the Florence Cathedral baptistry, which Ghiberti finally won. Links to other notorious figures of the late 13th century are the poets Dante Alighieri and Petrarch, or the art.
Is Dante Alighieri the one who wrote what was it called? The Dante's Chronicles? I'm completely wrong, I'm sure, but the hells in the different hells. Is that the guy?
Artist Giotto di Bondone, but were they the inspiration or product of the movement? Finally, there is the argument that competition for commissions between polymaths and artists like Brunelleschi, Ghiberti, Donatello and Masaccio
I know Donatello,
stimulated change.
but not the others. Historical perspective of the Renaissance.
What constitutes the Renaissance and its usefulness as a historical?
Someday I have to go to Italy or Europe. I'm from Europe, but I'm in North America right now, in Canada. But Europe. There's so much history in Europe, from Italy to France to England to Germany, Spain. I mean, there's so much history there. And as a child, I didn't really like history that much. The museums, all that was very bland to me. Nowadays, I can go to a museum and spend all day there. I mean, it's so, it's weird how, within the span of like 10 years, you're a completely new person.
Concept remains debatable. Indeed, the attachment to prominent characters as super protagonists is questionable. Equally, the 19th century exaltation of the term Renaissance appears to have lost some impact. The whole idea of a unified Renaissance as a historical definition seems in question. The word Renaissance is French for rebirth.
Yeah.
It first appeared in Jules Michelet's book in 1855 called Histoire de France.
I need to read the
Modern
book.
historians also apply the term to other profound and extensive changes,
Jules Michelet.
like the Carolingian Renaissance of the late 8th and 9th centuries and the medieval Renaissance of the 12th century. Of course,
That's interesting.
some historians question the right of the humanist revolution to call itself a Renaissance, claiming that it was merely a period of reminiscence and melancholy for classical antiquity. In contrast, others point to the similarities of thousand ties between the Middle Ages and the modern era.
Prosperous city-states. Yeah, the city-states were where you wanted to be. And to me, if you, and this is gonna sound weird, but if I could choose, this is weird. It sounds weird, but if I could somehow get reincarnated and go back, and I choose where I get reincarnated, of course, as whom, I would get reincarnated as a merchant in a city-state, because you don't have to think about take land and wars, and you have to prove yourself in the battle. No. All it's about money, banking. It's much more
In northern
prosperous.
and central Italy,
Look
prosperous
at this mess.
city-states grew and flourished from the late Middle Ages
Look at
onwards.
this mess.
The affluence occurred due to their commercial prowess.
Yeah.
Genoa and Venice profited from the trade links with the Levant that were established by the Crusades. Additionally, the Fourth Crusade devastated the commercial prominence of the Byzantine Roman Empire, effectively destroying it as a trade rival. which opened the gate to prosperity for the Genoese and the Venetians.
And
Trade
the
routes from the
Amalfi.
east through the Byzantine Empire and Arab states now reached the ports of Genoa, Venice, and Pisa. At the same time, silks, dyes, and spices reached Italian ports from the Levant. These were then resold to the rest of Europe at high profit margins.
Nice.
Meanwhile, there was affluence for the inland city-states. The Po Valley was rich agricultural land. The Champagne fairs or trade fairs attracted goods from France, Germany, and the Netherlands, with wheat.
Okay, those flags are really cool. You know, the French flag is awesome. I love the fleur de lis. Personally, it's a beautiful flag. The German flag is basically the whole Roman Emperor's flag, and the Netherlands flag it's a beautiful crest. Let me think, 14th century, 1400, so 1401, 15th century. So the Netherlands are still under the Habsburgs. So is that like their crest or something?
Wool and precious metals arriving through the system of roads and waterways. Mining and agriculture in the northern regions grew due to the profit from
Oh yeah, the
substantial
mining. There was a lot of money to be made by mining. I made a video on Jakob Fugger, on one of the richest men in history, and he was a Renaissance banker. Who his history is very very interesting. Who made most of his money from mining. Mining. He had a lot of mines in Hungary, but it was very
trade
interesting.
as far north as the Baltic.
He's actually the one who ended up electing the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, which.
As far south as Egypt. While
No,
the
that's Charles V.
city-states
His father. I think is it his father or Charles V? Anyway.
did not benefit from local resources in many instances. They eagerly turned trade into opulence. Florence, for example, imported wool from North Europe and later from Spain, while dyes came in from the east, creating a woolen textile industry under the trade guild Art della Lana. Florence emerged as one of the city-state's wealthiest cities through the production of these luxury, high-quality woolen goods.
I mean, being a city-state is amazing because you're making so much money and you don't have that much expense because your territory is so small. You don't have that many worries. Now, granted, your army is equally small, but your wealth is can protect you even if you have a small size.
Throughout the 13th century, the city-states expanded as an economically prosperous entity. It was a period of financial growth throughout Europe.
What's interesting, I'm sorry I'm pausing, guys. But what's interesting about the city-states is that most of the city-states, the way they're very fractured, is in the northern Italy. Whereas in the south, it's pretty unified. You have the Papal States in white, and the Kingdom of Naples, or I may be wrong here, but is that Naples? I know that is that the Kingdom of Naples yet, or is it the Kingdom of Aragon? Because Aragon owned Naples for quite a while.
However, nowhere was the impact so profound as for the city-states. Their economy thrived through a European network that linked the commercial hubs of the Mediterranean to the ports of the Hanseatic League in Northern Europe and the Baltic region, creating a strong economic network for the first time since the 4th century. Their prominence in commerce was so great that they became effectively free from the Holy Roman Empire and safe from foreign military intrusion. To support economic growth, the city-states developed an unparalleled trade infrastructure, with Florence as the commercial epicenter. They created a system of international banking with the gold florin as the main currency for international trade, and a foreign exchange system.
So basically the florin was what the US dollar is nowadays. It's the universal currency. It's very interesting. I wonder if there are still florins, golden florins out there in the world. I would like to own one. It's very part of history.
Developed joint stock companies, a more sophisticated accountancy practice of double-entry bookkeeping, government debt.
I need to learn about
insurance.
double-entry bookkeeping. I've heard so much.
Between the 11th and 13th centuries, Italy was in a period of growth and change. The population of Italy doubled during this period, while much of the development centered on the expansion of the city-states. The great cathedrals were rebuilt, and the Italians migrated from the countryside to the town.
Well, one of the reasons why there's so much beauty and so much opulence throughout Italy is because of that period. Because because they were so prosperous, they didn't have to. They had so much overflowing amount of wealth coming in that they could squander it or invest it, whatever you want to call it, into uh, cathedrals and beautiful fresks, and you could spend a lot of money on beauty, on art. And the Duomo di Siena is a beautiful. I've never been. It's a beautiful piece of architecture. The way it was made, it was like a double dome, where there's one dome and there's a smaller dome beneath, because it was one of the biggest domes during that era that was impossible to accomplish. And I remember the architect who came up with the idea, but it's brilliant.
By the 13th century, Venice, Florence, and Milan had over 100,000 residents, while Genoa, Bologna, and Verona stood at over 50,000. Italy reached a 20% rate of urbanization, turning it into the most urbanized society in the world.
What?
Commercial endeavors multiplied and took on a new sophistication to match the more intense trade markets. In the countryside, the agrarian revolution changed the face of agriculture. Feudalism inevitably declined as the city influence grew. The growth
it came
of
back
disposable
later on.
income created an in-demand market for luxury goods, which in turn led to further trade growth, which then saw the enrichment of tradesmen in ever larger numbers, who then in turn further increased demand for luxury goods. The commercial routes of Italian cities that spanned the Mediterranean Sea and beyond served as a conveyor belt of culture and knowledge during the 12th century. Amongst the riches transported by merchant ships were ancient Greek texts, long lost to most Europeans, that had been preserved by Arab scholars and then brought west following the Crusades and the subsequent conquest of Byzantine lands.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. That there were pieces of history that were basically lost to Europe, and the East were able to preserve them, and then they were they stolen or sold? The way it looks, I don't think they were sold.
Thereby reigniting medieval philosophy. What is more, Byzantine scholars flocked to Italy in the wake of the Ottoman conquest of the Byzantines between the 12th and 15th centuries. This gave rise to new linguistic studies at the recently established academies in Florence and Venice. It was a period of great belief in the
Florentine
ancients.
flag is beautiful.
Humanists hunted for ancient manuscripts in monasteries, finding great Latin works, including the histories of Tacitus, the architectural genius of Vitruvius, and the artistic work of the Greek genius Apelles.
It says how uncultured I am. I didn't recognize any of them.
In conclusion, the Renaissance probably began in 14th century Florence due to political restructure and social changes based around the growth of the city-states. It incorporated a new vision of language, art, and education. A critical characteristic of the Renaissance was the dependence on observation in science and the development of diplomacy. Humanism was a significant movement during the Renaissance. It focused on the ability of citizens to interact within their community. A characteristic of the Renaissance was the concentration on excellence in artistic pursuits. Historians debate the 19th century adoration of the Renaissance and individual culture heroes known as Renaissance men. There is significant doubt whether the Renaissance represents cultural advances from the Middle Ages, suggesting that the period was somewhat pessimistic and nostalgic for all things related to classical antiquity. Next up, we will look at the intricacies of Italian politics and the rise of the powerful merchant class of the Renaissance.
Yeah,
Thank you so
that will be very interesting. Go subscribe to the channel. Great channel. Uh, I'm also wondering how the merchant class, and I want to discover Italian politics in more depth. Uh, if there's one series that I'm watching right now, actually, I would recommend if you want to get a little bit of a glimpse into 1492 Italy. It's not that accurate historically, but it's a pretty good series. It's called The Borgias. I would recommend. Anywho, I hope you liked my reaction. If you did, like, subscribe, and all that. And it was a very interesting video. It was very good. Yeah, if you liked my reaction, leave a subscribe and all that. And I'll see you guys next time. See ya.